In prior years, Kenya would have sourced its maize import needs from her neighbours in East Africa. Uganda and Tanzania usually run surpluses, or Black Sea markets. But the ongoing crisis in Ukraine has effectively cut supplies from countries which usually account for 20% of global maize exports. So where then does that leave a country like Kenya? This is the view from the East African Grain Council.
Our production has fallen and has been falling over the years to the extent that when it comes to maize, our neighbors, Tanzania, Uganda, does fill that gap, feeding Kenyans. And for wheat, 90% is imported. Now, under the circumstances, and to your question, is the necessity of importation of maize from outside the EAC and COMESA something that is going to be looked at? The answer is definitely yes. And we have already recommended to government to consider this, and we raised our alarm much earlier. We had written an advisory. We've engaged from as early as October last year, starting first of all with feeds, because we noticed a phenomena where because of lack of raw materials to produce animal feeds, we already petitioned government and asked that importation of yellow maize to be allowed, and even soya to be allowed as early as last year, so that we could bring down the cost of animal feeds and sustain the livestock feed sector. Government had our recommendations, and they indeed allowed importation, but they put in a condition which made it impossible for anyone to bring in a grain, because they insisted that the grain that would come would have to be 100% GMO free. The challenge with that is that there's nowhere today where anyone can stand and do a test analysis and tell you that this grain I have is 100% GMO free, has no GMO events, because of the interactions in nature, in pollination, and what have you. So what we now are working with, even the EU standard, we are working with an allowance of 8 to 9%. That decision is yet to be made. So as a result, we don't have raw materials to manufacture feeds, and therefore prices of feeds have gone very high, and that's why we have a dairy milk supply issue, we have an eggs issue, we have issue with feed, fish, with chicken, and all that, and many farmers who are producing that have closed their operations, and the situation is quite dire. Now, coming to maize for food and looking at other sources like outside Africa, outside the region, that is a decision that should have been made more than 3 months ago, because there's a long lead time. Even when they make the decision tomorrow, it will take up to almost 60 days for the logistics to be done, for and then again availability, given the fact that Russia and Ukraine are not able to ship also their maize stock out, so demand has increased. The more the government takes time to make a decision on allowing importation on duty-free basis for maize from the other region to deal with the current crisis, the more they delay, the worse the problem will be.
Okay, so 2021, though, did see the harvest. In fact, not just 2021. If you look at the trends from around 2018, 2019 to last year, maize yields have been consistently in decline. Wheat yields also have essentially been consistently in decline. We're down to, I think, around 245,000 tons on wheat last year. Maize output was down almost 13% last year as well. Is this all attributable to the drought-like conditions, below average rains that we've seen across the region in the last year?
This decline in production has been caused by a number of factors. One of the factors, as you say, is the issue of climate change and weather issues, where a lot of times rain does not come at the expected times. Even this current season we are in, you may be aware that some farmers planted maize in anticipation of the rains to come. So some little rain came, and some germination happened. And then soon after that, rains disappeared, the crops dried out. And then when the rains came back again, the farmers had to buy more seed and go back to the farms to till again and to plant again. So we now are facing a delayed season. The other thing that is affecting yields is the issue of soil health and the fertility of our soils. We have done, our farmers have ended up doing a lot of monocropping, doing the same crop on the same piece of land year after year without any rotation. And that leads or has led to a lot of loss of nutrients in the soil, so that the soils are literally not fertile.
What about the tuber side of things? I know last year wasn't particularly good for sorghum and millet as a crop, but potato yields were relatively good. They were up around 10.5% to 2.1 million tons. Do we have a better harvest on some of those other crops, potatoes, sweet potatoes, cassava, sorghum, millet, that might perhaps induce people to switch over to those instead of maize and wheat, which on a price basis will simply not be an option?
Yeah, it's an interesting consideration to ask ourselves with the crisis now facing maize and wheat. What options do we have? And as you mentioned, we have a good crop in potatoes. We even have sweet potatoes available. The challenge you have with that is really around consumer behavior, consumer tastes and preferences, and really what consumers consider food, and also looking at the nutrition you get out of the food that you take, including even energy, plus other things like preparation and conveniences around that.